Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I apologize about the lateness. I was in another meeting. Let's get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He speaks without sound or letter or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And as always, I ask Allah to grant myself and to grant all of you sincere intentions. Ameen. So we're continuing in this book, the 7 Hadith, obligatory knowledge that every Muslim must know. We've made it to page 11, which is a section that deals with major Hadith, and how to lift it. I'll remind everyone that Hadith is Emrun I'tibari. It's something that comes onto some of the parts of the body. Okay, it's not something tangible that you can see. It's not empirical. But it's something that has a Sharia ruling tied to it. So this hadith, it comes on the body, and while it's on the body, it prevents your salat from being valid. Okay, so it's crucial that when you make salat, that you remove hadith from the body. And we mentioned that hadith is of 2 types. There's minor hadith, which is hadith that just comes on your face, your hands, part of your head, and on your feet. That hadith is lifted by performing a valid wudu. Then there's also major hadith. The second type of hadith is major hadith. Major hadith comes onto all of the organs of the body. And major hadith is only lifted by performing a valid ghusl. So today, inshallah, we're going to talk about ghusl. It says, there are 5 matters that cause major hadith to afflict someone. Okay. So we're going to talk right now about the 5 causes of major hadith. If any of these 5 causes happen, then know that major hadith has come onto you, onto your body. Of these 5 causes, 2 of them pertain to men and women. They could happen to a man or they could happen to a woman. But the other 3, they only happen to women. Okay, let's talk about the first one. The first one is sexual intercourse. So if anyone has sexual intercourse, then major hadith has come onto their body. And they will not be able to perform a valid salat until they have lifted the major hadith from their body by performing a valid ghusl. But what is sexual intercourse? What's the definition of sexual intercourse according to the Sharia? The definition of sexual intercourse is for the head of the man's penis to disappear inside of the vagina of a woman. This is called sexual intercourse. I'm going to say it again. For the head of the man's penis to disappear inside the vagina of a woman. Okay, so you should understand from this that the entire penis does not have to be inserted in order for it to count as sexual intercourse. If the head has completely disappeared, then intercourse has taken place. And if intercourse has taken place, then that means the major hadith is on the person's body. I will also note here that the common phrases that are used in the United States these days, they say things like oral sex and anal sex, and they use the word sex with all these qualifiers and stuff. Know that those things, according to the Sharia, do not count as sex. Okay, sex involves the head of a penis and a vagina. Okay, all of those other things technically are not sex. However, if a man were to put the head of his penis into an anus, regardless of whether that anus belonged to a woman or a man, this, while it is not sexual intercourse, this is treated in the Sharia the same as sexual intercourse. Okay, so it's like sexual intercourse. This means that if a person did that, major hadith would in fact come onto his body. The other point that I usually try to make when I talk about this one, which is sexual intercourse, is that the mere insertion of the head into the vagina means sexual intercourse happened and major hadith occurred, even if that was all that happened. Even if, for example, orgasm is not reached, doesn't matter. The fact that the intercourse occurred means that the major hadith has come onto the person's body. Some of you maybe are not accustomed to a person using these sorts of words and being this graphic. So if I'm shocking you, I do apologize for shocking you. But know that for clarity of what the religious rule is, I need to be this explicit. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he praised the women of the Ansar. The Ansar are the Muslims who are from Medina, who welcomed the migrants who came from Mecca and supported them. They're called the Ansar. The women of the Ansar used to ask Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about their menstruations and about things that people would typically be shy to ask about. And our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he praised them for it. He praised the women of the Ansar, and he said, because they did not let their shyness stop them from seeking knowledge of the religion. So it's good for those of you out there who are shy to use these kinds of words. It's good that you're shy to use these words. And I assure you, when I'm not giving this lesson, I don't mention these kinds of words. But this is obligatory knowledge. Okay, this is knowledge that every Muslim must know. Okay, and you're not going to learn it with the precision that you need if I start dancing around the subject. Okay, so I need to just be clear about what the rule is. Inshallah, you understand. There may be a couple more cases in this lesson where I say something that might be a tiny bit graphic, but inshallah, it will not be obscene. So that's one thing. One of the causes of major hadith is sexual intercourse. There's a second cause of major hadith, which is the release of mani. Okay, mani, if you remember the wudu lesson, we mentioned mani and what it is. Mani is an Arabic word referring to the fluid that comes out of a person when the person reaches orgasm. Okay, in English, we use the word semen to refer to the fluid that comes out of a man. And I don't know what word we use to refer to the fluid that comes out of a woman, but the books of fiqh, the scholars who have explained the Sharia to us, they use the Arabic word mani, which is a word, it refers to what the man releases, and it also refers to what the woman releases. And that's what's intended here. Whether you're a man or a woman, if you release that fluid, then major hadith comes onto your body. It doesn't matter if this fluid was released because of sexual intercourse or if it was released because of some other means. Okay, a person might do something which is not the definition. It doesn't meet the definition of sexual intercourse, but if mani comes out, the major hadith occurs. Even if the person just had a dream and he wakes up and he sees that mani came out, then he knows that the ruling of the Sharia is that he has major hadith on his body. Okay. Sometimes a person might wake up in the morning and he'll see that some kind of fluid came out, and he won't know what fluid that is. He won't know, is that mani or is that something else that might come out of the body? Okay. Some of you may be familiar that when a person is very sexually excited, Sometimes a moisture comes out from the man and from the woman. A certain moisture comes out. The slang term for it is being wet. This moisture is not mani. This moisture that I'm talking about now is not mani. But a person might find that he has this moisture in his underwear or her underwear. And it may not be clear when he or she sees something in the underwear, whether that thing is mani or if it's not mani. So the scholars of the Shafi'i school, may Allah have mercy on them, they told us three signs that something is mani. If any one of these signs are present, then you know that this thing is mani and it's not something else. You don't need all three signs to be true. If any one of them is true, then you should conclude that that substance that you see is in fact mani. Okay, what's the first sign? Is that it comes out in spurts. Okay, one thing that separates mani from the other things that come out of the body is that it comes out in spurts. So if the substance came out of the body in spurts, then that means this substance is mani. The second sign is that the release of the substance is accompanied by pleasure. So if something came out of the body and it was accompanied by pleasure, then you should conclude that it's mani, even if it did not come out in spurts. Because remember, not all three signs have to happen. If any one of them happens, then you should conclude that the fluid that came out is mani. The first sign is that it comes out in spurts. The second sign is that it's accompanied by pleasure. The third sign is that it has a certain smell. So if it smells like mani, then you conclude that it is mani. What's the smell? Well, if this fluid that you found is wet, then mani, when it's wet, it smells like dough. Like, when you bake bread, you prepare dough and then you bake it in the oven, it turns into bread. When it's dough, it has a certain smell. And mani, when it's wet, it smells like dough. And mani, when it's dry, after it dries, it smells like egg whites. When it's dry, it smells like egg whites. So if you see something, say you wake up in the morning and you look in your underwear and there's something in there and you don't know what it is, okay, and you can't remember. Did it come out in spurts? You don't know, you were asleep. Did it come out with pleasure? You don't know, you were asleep. Well, you can smell it. You can look. Is it wet right now or is it dry right now? If it's wet and it smells like dough, then that means it's mani. If it's dry and it smells like egg whites, then that means it's mani. These are the three signs that the scholars of the Shafi'i school mentioned as signs that the fluid is mani. And these are the only three signs that I've encountered in my studies. Okay, so I say that because I want to make sure everyone understands you cannot rely on color to know if something is mani or not. Okay, for one thing, the color of the man's mani and the color of the woman's mani is not always the same. In fact, even the same person, his mani may be a different color from one day to the next. And if someone is sick, their mani can change color still. So the color is not a reliable sign. Do not try to use the color to know if something is mani or not. Instead, use the three signs, which are, it comes out in spurts, and or it's accompanied by pleasure, and or it has the smell of mani. What's the smell of mani? Mani, when it's wet, smells like dough, and mani, when it's dry, it smells like egg whites. Okay, inshallah, that's clear. So these first two causes are the two causes which can happen to men and also can happen to women. Okay, a man can have sexual intercourse and so can a woman. A man can release mani and so can a woman. So if you're a man or a woman, if either of these things happens, then know that you have major hadith covering all of your body. The third one, what's the third cause of major hadith? It says the end of one's menses. Okay, so the way this is worded is a little bit tricky, perhaps maybe a little bit confusing. So the beginning of a woman's menses, when we say menses, we mean her menstruation, her period, right? The beginning of her menses is when the major hadith comes onto her body. So what's written in the book where it says the end of one's menses, might confuse a person, because it's actually the beginning of the menses when the major Hadeeth comes on her body. But it's the end of the menses when her obligation to make ghusl kicks in. So I worded it here as the end of one's menses because at the time that I wrote it, I was thinking, when is the person obligated to make ghusl? I wasn't really thinking, when is the time that the major Hadeeth comes on the person? So just to make it clear, the major Hadeeth comes when the menstruation begins, but your obligation to make ghusl doesn't come until the menstruation ends. Okay, this is one of the matters that only affects women. And know that there are certain rules of menstruation. Among them is that it cannot happen to a woman prior to her reaching approximately 9 lunar years of age. Okay, I say approximately because it could happen, say, 10 days, 15 days, something less than 16 days before she turns 9 Islamic years old. It could happen, a few days before she turns 9 Islamic years old. But that's the youngest that it can happen. Another thing that one should know about menstruation is that it must last at least 24 hours. So if a woman started bleeding from her vagina and the blood, she did not have 24 hours of blood coming out, then it would not be considered to be menstruation. And when I say 24 hours, I don't mean 24 consecutive hours. Like if she had, blood come out for 6 hours on Monday and then it stopped, then it came out for 6 hours on Tuesday and then it stopped, and then it came out for 12 hours on Wednesday and then it stopped, that would add up to 24 hours of blood coming out. So then we would say, yes, that was her menstruation. Okay, but the total amount of time of blood coming out of the woman cannot be less than 24 hours. If it's less than 24 hours, then according to the Shafi'i school, it's not menstruation. Also, the menstruation cannot last for more than 15 days. Meaning that if the first day of her menstruation was the first of the month, then if her menstruation has not ended by the 15th of the month, then it's a special case that we're not going to talk about now. But we would not say, like, say she bled for 16 days, we would not say that all 16 of those days were period. Okay, we would do a certain process to determine which of those days were period and which of those days were not period. But a woman's period, according to the Sharia, does not last more than 15 days. Okay, if she bleeds longer than 15 days, then she'll get the judgment that a portion of that bleeding was due to some kind of illness or injury. And of course, if a woman is ill or injured, this does not mean that she does not make salat. But if she is having her menstruation, then she does not make salat. All right, so no woman will miss salat for more than 15 days in a month. I think that's enough details on menstruation. Inshallah, maybe sometime after we finish the book, we'll do like a whole little mini course about the various kinds of blood that can come from a woman. Which brings me to the fourth cause, which is, it says the end of one's postpartum bleeding. So another type of blood that can come from a woman is postpartum bleeding. This is bleeding that comes from the vagina of a woman after giving childbirth because of the childbirth. Okay, and I want to make clear that when I say childbirth, I'm using it in a very loose way. Okay, even if what comes out of her was not, properly speaking, a child, like say she had a miscarriage early in the pregnancy and all that came out, it just looked like a lump of flesh. It didn't look like a child. Even then, this counts as childbirth because I'm using it in a broad way. What I mean is that whatever was in her womb came out. That's what I mean when I say childbirth. So if she starts bleeding after emptying her womb, and the reason for the blood is because she emptied her womb, then that blood is called postpartum bleeding. that blood is called postpartum bleeding. And once the postpartum bleeding begins, her major hadith comes onto her body, and her obligation to make a ghusl comes once the postpartum bleeding has ended. Postpartum bleeding could last for just a moment. It's possible that a woman's postpartum bleeding is literally just like one push of blood comes out, and that's it. That's all the postpartum bleeding she gets. But it's also possible that a woman's postpartum bleeding could last as much as 60 days. Okay, so the minimum is just one burst of blood, and the maximum is 60 days of postpartum bleeding. Again, if she bleeds more than 60 days, then the ruling of the Shafi'i school is that some portion of that bleeding was not postpartum bleeding, but was due to injury or illness. So yes, and like we said with the menstruation, the major hadith comes at the start of the bleeding, and the obligation to make ghusl comes at the end of the bleeding. And the fifth and final cause of major hadith is what? It's childbirth itself. Okay, so if you imagine that a woman gives birth to a child, but she does not bleed afterwards, she does not have any postpartum bleeding, which is possible. Okay, so it is possible that sometimes a woman doesn't have any postpartum bleeding. All right, so if a woman gives birth and she does not have postpartum bleeding, even in that case, she must make a ghusl before she can make salat, because the childbirth itself causes major hadith to come onto the person. In most cases, she'll give birth and then she'll bleed, and so she won't need to make ghusl until her bleeding is over. But in the event that a woman does not bleed, she would still need to make a ghusl after childbirth, because childbirth itself is a cause of major hadith. I'll also add that some of the books of Shafi'i fiqh, they mention a cause number 6. This book has 5 causes in it. Some books of Shafi'i fiqh mention 6 causes of major hadith. And the 6th one that they mention is death. They mention that if a person dies, then this obligates a ghusl. And they're correct about that. That's true. I did not put that in this book because, again, the purpose of this book is the obligatory knowledge that you have to know to live your life. Okay, if any of these 5 things that happen in this book, if any of these 5 things happen to you, then you need to know that you have major hadith on your body and you have an obligation to make ghusl. Death is a little bit different. Like, if death happens to you, right, if you die, you don't have an obligation to make ghusl. Okay, you're dead. You don't have any obligations at that point. So that's why I didn't include death here in the book, because if you die, you're not the one who's obligated to perform ghusl on your body. Rather, other people are the ones obligated to perform a ghusl upon your body. Okay, this is why we'll talk about those things when we get to the section about funeral salat and what pertains to it. So I didn't mention it here because if you die, it's not your obligation. Okay, it's not your obligation to make a ghusl. It'll be someone else's. Are there any questions about these 5 causes before I move to the next section? Okay, well, inshallah, there are no questions. I'll continue. It says, if any of these causes occur, meaning if any of the 5 causes listed there occur, then one must lift major hadith by performing ghusl. Okay, so you must lift minor hadith from your body by performing a ghusl. And I remind you that there's no particular time in which this ghusl must be done. Okay, you don't have to make ghusl immediately as soon as one has sex or as soon as one's menstruation ends. You don't need to make ghusl immediately. However, your salats have times. Your salats have times. Each salat has a window of time within which it must be performed. And the ghusl must be done before you can make salat. So it means that although you don't have to make ghusl immediately, you do have to make sure that you make ghusl before you make salat. And you also have to make sure that your salat is prayed within its time. Okay, and so take that into account as far as understanding how much time you can wait before you make ghusl. Okay, it's not going to be the same for every situation. Okay, it might be the case that a woman's menstruation ended, just like 10 minutes before the prayer time will end. So she's not going to be able to waste time. She's going to have to make her ghusl very fast and start praying. But it could also be that her ghusl, her menstruation ends at 8 in the morning, and Dhuhr time isn't going to come in until 1 in the afternoon. So she has hours before she needs to make that ghusl. Dhuhr comes in at 1, and maybe like in the summer, maybe Dhuhr doesn't even go out until 5 o'clock. So she has from 8 until a little bit before 5 to make that ghusl. So it depends on the timings of the salats and how long it takes you to make ghusl. That's going to tell you how much time you can wait. It says, okay, after mentioning that if any of these 5 causes happens, after mentioning that you need to make ghusl, it says ghusl has 2 integrals. And I'll remind you what an integral is. What is an integral? An integral is something that the validity of your action depends upon. And on top of that, this integral is part of the action. Okay, so for example, when we talked about wudu, we said the integrals of wudu are 6. An intention, washing the face, washing the hands up to and including the elbows, wiping part of the head, washing the feet up to and including the ankles, and doing them in order. Those are the integrals, meaning those 6 things are part of the wudu. And if you leave one of them out, then you did not make wudu, because the validity of the wudu depends on you doing all 6. This is what it means to be an integral. For ghusl, there are only 2 integrals. Okay, so if you leave any one of them out, that means your ghusl is not valid. If you leave either of the 2 integrals out, then your ghusl is not valid. What are these 2 integrals, the 2 essential things that you must do for your ghusl to be valid? It says, number 1, intention to lift major Hadeeth or other acceptable intention. So the first integral of a valid ghusl is that you have to have the intention. Okay, there are several different intentions that can be valid. Okay, the easy one to remember is you have the intention that you're making ghusl to lift major Hadeeth. You're making ghusl to lift major Hadeeth. This is an easy intention to remember, and it's going to be valid in every case where ghusl is an obligation upon you. So that's an easy one to remember. But there are also other acceptable intentions, including intention of obligatory ghusl or intention of permissibility of salat. And there are others. I think the easiest to remember is that you're performing ghusl to lift major Hadeeth. Okay. It is not sufficient. It is not sufficient and therefore not valid if all your intention is to take a bath, or if it's your intention to take a shower, or if it's your intention to be clean. Okay, these sorts of intentions are not sufficient because the purpose of an intention is to distinguish between worship and that which is not worship. The intention is also used to distinguish between types of worship. Okay, so if your intention is just to take a shower, well, that's not enough to know, is this a shower that you're doing in obedience to Allah, or is it just a shower because you want to get clean? Similarly, if it's just your intention that you want to be clean, well, that's not enough to know whether you're doing it for hygiene reasons or whether you're doing it for deen reasons. Okay, so that's a intention that's too vague will not be valid. You want to intend that you're doing a ghusl, not merely a shower or a bath, but you're doing a ghusl. And that the reason why you're doing the ghusl is to lift major Hadeeth, or so that you can make salat. Something like that would be a valid intention. Then it says, this intention must be present in the heart when one first begins to wash the body. Okay, what that means is that your ghusl doesn't begin until this valid intention is in your heart. So if you started washing your body before this intention was in your heart, then all of that stuff that you washed before the intention was in your heart, that stuff, it doesn't count. You got to wash all those places over again. Okay, you're going to have to wash those places over again because the intention was not there when you washed them. Okay, this does not mean that you need to somehow time it exactly right so that at the precise moment that water touches some part of your body, that's the exact moment that you made your intention. That's not what this means. It means the intention is in your heart from the time you begin the ghusl. And whatever you washed before the intention was there was not part of the ghusl, and it needs to be rewashed. That's what it means. Second integral. The second integral of ghusl, the second thing you must do in order for your ghusl to be valid. It says washing the entire body with water. Now I'm going to be extra clear here. When I say you have to wash your entire body, what I mean is that you have to wash the entire exterior of your body. Okay, we're not saying that you have to wash the inside of your body. It is not an integral of ghusl to rinse out your mouth or to rinse out the inside of your nose. Okay, these are sunnahs of ghusl, but they're not integrals of ghusl. Okay, you are not required to wash the inside of your butt or something like that. No, what you need to wash in the ghusl is the outside of your body. Okay, and you need to wash the outside of your body with pure and purifying water. And I remind you that whenever we say wash, when it comes to the chapter of purification, whenever we say wash, we mean that the pure and purifying water is flowing over the body. Okay, so if the water flowed over your hand, then that part of your hand got washed. If the water flowed over your knee, then that part of your body got washed. Okay, if there's some part of the body where, the water is no longer flowing, you maybe wiped a wet hand over it, but there is no flowing water under your hand, then in that case, all you did is wipe, not wash. Okay, so in ghusl, you need to make sure you're washing. So the water must be flowing over the whole body. It says, including, so after saying you must wash the whole body with water, it says, including all skin and hair. So you must wash every single hair on your body from the root to the tip. And you must wash every single bit of skin on your body. When it comes to the lips, if you just close your mouth and leave it relaxed in a natural way, just part of the lips that you see when your mouth is closed and relaxed, that's part of the outside of your body, so that part of your lips needs to be washed. Okay, be careful. Some people, when they're in the shower, they don't want water to get in their mouth, so they close their mouth tight. They're like, if you do this, then part of what needs to be washed is not going to get washed. Okay, you want to relax so that this part of your lips gets washed with the rest of the outside of the body. And yes, this part of your nose, I'm not talking about the nostrils. I'm talking about just the skin here. This part of your nose, this also needs to be washed. Okay, the corners of your eyes need to be washed. Behind your ears, like behind the back bottom of your ear here. These are all places that need to be washed, and places where a person, if they're not paying attention, places they might miss. Between your fingers, between your toes. Okay? These are all important places. So you wash all the skin and all the hair. And then it says, even if the hair is thick. Even if the hair is thick. Okay, so when we were talking about wudu, we mentioned a special case where if a man has a thick beard, okay, meaning if the hair growing on the jawbone or growing on the chin is thick, meaning that a person at normal conversation distance cannot see the skin between the hairs. If a man has hair that's thick along the jawbones or on the chin, then we said in wudu that he does not have to wash the inside of the beard. That when he washes the face, he can just wash the outside of the beard, the part in the front, and that's enough. He doesn't have to wash the inside and get all the hairs or anything like that. This was a special rukhsa, which we had in wudu. But this rukhsa does not exist in ghusl. In ghusl, there's no special rule that says you can just wash the outside of your beard. In ghusl, you must wash every single hair from the root to the tip. Okay, and it's your responsibility to make sure that it's been washed. For those of you who have braids, I frequently get asked about braids. Can a person make a valid ghusl with braids? To that I say, well, it depends on how thick the braids are. If the water has flowed, like it went through the braid and came out the other side of the braid, well, then that hair got washed. Okay, but if your braids are so thick that you're not sure if the water went through or not, then in that case, my advice to you is to open up the braid and wash your hair in such a way, excuse me, and wash your hair in such a way that you know that the entire hair has been washed from the root to the tip. And yes, it's permissible to submerge your hair. Okay, just for easiness sake, if you're, swimming at the beach or something, you can just dip your hair into the water and pull it out, and then the whole thing's been washed. You haven't missed any spots if your hair was completely underwater. Lastly, it says, if one has bulky najasa on his body. What in the world does that mean, bulky? Why did I put bulky there in quotation marks? Bulky najasa. First off, what is najasa? We haven't talked a whole lot about najasa. Najasa, there are 15 things which, according to the Sharia, are filthy. The Sharia declares them filthy, which means we need to avoid touching them. We need to avoid contact with these things. These things are things like, urine and vomit and feces, okay, and wine and liquor, pork, haram meat, dogs, things like that. Many of these things have mass to it. That's what I mean when I say they're bulky. I mean they have size, they have mass. So, for example, let's say that a person, was walking outside. He stumbled. When he fell, he held out his hands to break his fall, and his hand went right into some poop that was out there in the grass. Okay, so he has poop on his hand. Now, when he goes to make ghusl, this poop that's on his hand, this is what I mean when I say bulky najasa. He has najasa on his body, and this najasa has mass to it. The najasa has mass to it. Okay? If a person has najasa on his body and that najasa has mass, then in that case, what he needs to do is he needs to wash once to rid himself of the bulk of the najasa. That mass of najasa, he needs to get it off his body. And then he needs to wash a second time that one part of the body where the najasa was. He needs to wash that one part a second time in order to lift the major hadith. So if the najasa is bulky, it requires 2 washes. One to get rid of the bulky najasa and one to lift the major hadith. However, if the najasa on the person's body is not bulky, meaning there's no mass to it, then in that case, one single wash will remove the najasa and also lift the major hadith. What's an example of najasa that's not bulky? It would be like, say someone got urine on their leg, okay? And then the urine dried up. So there's no actual urine there anymore. There's no actual substance. There's no mass of urine there. But maybe the smell of urine is still there. The smell is still there. That means one of the traces of the urine is there, but the urine itself is gone. This is an example of najasa, which is on the leg, but it has no bulk to it. It has no mass to it. In this case, one wash would be sufficient to remove the najasa and also to lift the major hadith. And so if the najasa were hukmiyya means that there's no mass to it and there's not even traces to it either. Like it's like, imagine if the urine got on his leg and it dried up and it did not even leave a smell. Like no color of urine was there, no smell of urine was there, no taste of urine was there. So in this case, this najasa is what we call najasa hukmiyya. It has the hukum, it has the ruling from the Sharia that najasa is present, even though there's no evidence of the najasa present. It's just a ruling. If you have najasa like that, najasa hukmiyya, najasa that has no mass and no taste, color, or smell, then in that case also one single wash is sufficient to remove the judgment that the najasa is there and also to lift the major hadith. Okay, so one wash is sufficient in which cases? When the najasa is hukmiyya, meaning no mass and no traces. One wash is also sufficient if the najasa has no mass, but it does have traces. Even then, one wash is sufficient. When is the only case when you need two washes? If the najasa has mass to it. If there's bulk to the najasa, then you need one wash to remove that bulk, and then a second wash to remove whatever traces may remain, and also to lift the major hadith. That's what it means when it says if one has bulky najasa on his body, it also must be removed prior to the washing of that organ. There's one other thing that normally I like to mention when I talk about ghusl, and that is that if a person has minor hadith on their body and major hadith on their body, does this mean they have to make a wudu and a ghusl? The answer is no. Okay, a ghusl will lift major hadith and also will lift minor hadith. Okay, so when you're making ghusl, that one wash, it lifts major and minor hadith. Even if in your intention was just to lift major hadith, the minor hadith will also be lifted. The minor hadith will also be lifted. However, be careful, because most people, when they take a shower, they will touch their private part with the inside part of their hand without a barrier. If you do that, then in the middle of your ghusl, you will do something to cause minor hadith to come onto your body. Okay? So if you already washed your face as part of the ghusl before you touched your private part, then what that means is when you wash your face as part of the ghusl, you lifted major and minor hadith from your face. But then later on in the ghusl, when you touched your private part with the inside part of your hand without a barrier, now minor hadith came onto the face. This is a new minor hadith, which was not lifted by your ghusl. So you want to be careful about that. Yes, in the ghusl, like during the ghusl, major and minor hadith are both lifted from the body. But in the course of the ghusl, you might actually put minor hadith back onto your body. And in that case, you're going to want to make a wudu after you finish your ghusl, just to make sure that the minor hadith is all gone. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I'll take questions now about this section of ghusl. Question 1. So you mean wipe and be underwater at same time? That's one way to do it. So like if you're taking a shower, you could have the water land on your body, at which point the water will be flowing down your body. And then you just use your hand to push the water to the place you want it to go. Okay, there's going to be some part of your body that needs to be washed. You push the water over there with your hand. That's fine. But you don't need to actually take a true shower. You know, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to make a ghusl with 4 muds, sometimes 5. A mud is this much water, the amount of water that you hold in your 2 hands, like this. If you make a bowl out of your 2 hands, this is called a mud. He used to use 4 muds to make a ghusl. And we're talking right now about a man who had hair on top of his head that was long, and he had hair in the beard that was long. And still, 4 muds of water were enough for him. Okay, those of us who take showers, we use many, many, many times that amount of water. So it's good to use less water when you make a ghusl or a wudu. You could just take some water, pour it on your shoulder, and then just spread it around, push it down your body until it goes down to your feet, inshallah. And as long as that water is flowing, it's lifting major hadith all the way down, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. The question is, including the navel. Yes, the navel also must be washed in the ghusl because it's on the outside of your body. Okay, meaning it can be seen. If a person were standing in front of you, they can see your navel. So therefore, you have to wash it. Similarly, the ears, the ear canal, the part of the ear canal that can be seen from outside is part of the outside of your body, and it needs to be washed in the ghusl. Sometimes, we get asked questions. Well, if you have to wash the inside of the ear when you make ghusl, but if water goes into the inside of the ear, it breaks your fast. How can a person ever make ghusl in Ramadan? Like during the daytime? We get these kinds of questions. The answer is that if you say wake up in the daytime of Ramadan and you need to make a ghusl, and you don't want to break your fast, but you do need to make ghusl, then what you do is you fill your hand with water like this, and then you turn your head sideways. You turn your head sideways, and you can dip your ear into that puddle of water that you have in your hand, and the water will reach all of the places that need to be washed in the ghusl, but the water will not go so deep that it invalidates the fast, because the fast will not be invalidated unless the water goes deeper than what your index finger can reach. If you stick your index finger into your ear canal, it only goes a certain distance in. The fast is not broken unless water goes deeper than that. And if you just do this, the water will not go deeper than that. Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, then in that case, wait, another question. Okay, so if you have non-bulky najasa on your body, yes, one wash is sufficient to remove the najasa and also to lift minor hadith in wudu. Vomit, though, I would not say vomit is non-bulky. Okay, vomit has mass to it. You can see it. You can touch it. This means it's bulky. When we say something is non-bulky, we mean it's just a smell, like there's nothing to touch or to see. It's just a smell, or it's just a color, or it's just a taste with no substance. As long as there's substance there, then that's what we mean when we say it's bulky. Okay, and if it's bulky, then it will require 2 washes. As for the clothing, if a person has clothing that has vomit in it, then that person must wash the clothes until the vomit and the traces of the vomit are gone. If they wash the clothes very well, and despite washing the clothes very well, the color is still there, then this color will be excused. Or if the smell is still there after washing it well, then the smell will be excused. If the taste is still there after washing it well, then it is not excused. Similarly, if the color and the smell are both there after washing it well, then that will not be excused either. But you just wash with water, inshallah. She also asked, should you remove the najasa before wudu? It's your choice. It's your choice. Like, for example, if the najasa is, say, on your neck, okay, this is not a place that you need to wash in your wudu. So if you want, you can remove the najasa first and then make wudu. Or if you want, you can make wudu first and then remove the najasa. The order in that case is not important. But if you had the vomit on your forearm, for example, well then, yes, you're going to have to remove the najasa first before you do your wudu. Question: if you're making a ghusl by submerging yourself in water, that when must you have the intention? Okay, well, if you make ghusl by submerging yourself in water, if your body is completely submerged, meaning all of your body, every bit of it is underwater, then in that case, ghusl happens in an instant. And wudu also. If you're submerged when you make wudu, the wudu happens in an instant. So all you need to do is make the intention, and that is the very same instant when the wudu occurs or the ghusl occurs. You just need to make sure you're submerged when you make that intention. When you're not submerged, wudu has an order to it. Got to do, the things in a certain order. When you're submerged, then the order happens by default. It all happens in that one instant. MashaAllah. Ghusl doesn't even have an order. Okay. Well, then in that case, let's say La ilaha illallah before we go. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. While we're here, I'll just add one other thing, just for benefit. It's not pertaining to the class that we just took, but the name of the most beloved person to all of us, his name is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A lot of us here are American, and we don't pronounce the name Muhammad properly. So I just want to remind everyone to say Muhammad. Okay, the H sound is it has a lot of breath to it, and it comes from here, comes from the middle of the throat, down like the Adam's apple. That's the part of the throat where the ha comes from. Okay, so it comes from down there, and it has a lot of breath. The M is a double M. There's two M's, so you need to make that M last a little bit more time. You got to almost hum it. Muhammad. Muhammad. You want to hold that M sound for a little bit of time to show that there's two M's and not one. And the mistake I hear the most is that following the M, there should be an A sound. His name is Muhammad, not Muhammad. Okay, you should not be saying an I sound after the M. Don't say Muhammad or Muhammad. Say Muhammad. Muhammad. There's an A. And this is important, mashallah. Not just because we love him and we want to say his name right, but it's important also for the validity of our prayers, because in the salat we need to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Okay, if you say Muhammadan Rasulullah, well, that's not the right way to say it. Okay. Barakallahu feekum. I'll see you next week, inshallah, at this time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.